The final clash of the Titans as the curtain falls on one of the most spectacular motorsport shows ever seen in South Africa. The last race for the mighty Class A modified touring cars in the Wesbank Challenge. After 11 years, the formula is changing to American-style NASCAR-based V8 saloon cars. The swan song is at Cape Town's Killarney circuit, but apart from the cars, it was the stars who turned this into a success story.
It's a very sad weekend because it's the end of the cars as we know them. After every race before this, no matter what has happened, you always know there's another race. If it didn't go well, then you could work harder and make up for it. And you don't understand what it means when something like this ends until this weekend came upon us. And I've had a sadness in my heart for a couple of days now. And as the weekend grows on, it becomes more so. They were very, very exciting cars to drive. Every time I got into the motor car, it surprised me anew with the amount of power it had, the braking forces it could generate. It's by far the most exciting vehicle that I've ever driven and probably ever will drive.
Another stalwart in this formula is former champion Terry Moss, who together with his Rothmans Audi teammate Chris Aberdeen has been responsible for many memorable moments in the Wesbank Championship.
One can remember me taking over on a Maribor seat at VW, and the very first year I won the championship, Class A championship. Second year I won Class A. Third year I won Class A again. So for me it was a success story. Getting used to the car. I've been with the Audis now for 4 years. Been fantastic cars to drive.
And of course, to many people, the biggest star of them all, top rally ace and newly crowned Wesbank modified touring car champion, Cyril van der Merwe.
Well, of course, it's quite sad because it's the most exciting cars we've seen in this country for a long time, and they're not only exciting to watch, they're very exciting to drive too. And I think after this, anything else will be quite a letdown. I wouldn't say there was any particular highlight. It was always enjoyable racing in the formula, and most of the races were quite tight and exciting. So I think the whole formula was probably a highlight.
With the demise of the big bangers of South African motor racing, what can the fans expect to see in the new season? We put this question to Wesbank Modified Racing Association Chairman Dick Sorensen.
The big spectacular cars are out, and we're going into a new formula. We're going into a new era where we're building a V8 formula based on quite restricted specification. The Class A cars will be tube frame cars. It will enable potential competitors to convert front-wheel drive cars to rear-wheel drive cars, and they'll have a body placed on it, restricted wheelbase, restricted track, but they will be very spectacular cars with very powerful and torquey engines. Class B cars will be the same as Willie Hepburn's running at the moment, Peter Lindenberg and so on, and they're based on a tin body, pretty much a standard type body, with modified suspension, but the same specification on engines, gearboxes and solid rear axles.
We wanted to know from Gary Dunkley what he thought about the proposed new class specifications.
There are rules for Class A that differ from this car, but naturally Class A and B are going to be a lot closer in the future. They're obviously going to restrict the Class B cars in terms of horsepower by limiting the revs and stuff like that. Just to make a gap between A and B, because the engines will be basically the same. The cars should be very similar, they run the same weights, and but they need to be separated by some means.
Dunkley will be making his comeback in a brand new Willie Hepburn-built V8 Opel record, but looking at the championship standings, we see that van der Merwe has already wrapped up the overall and Class A title, while Morgan Ruud and Moss will battle it out for second position. George Bezaitnotes leading Class C and would like to win his first Class C title.
I don't want to get tangled up with the Toyotas because that can be dangerous. They are obviously very keen to win the championship, and they know that I must not finish at all to win it. So I'll stay clear of them. Just hope they don't get their strategy won't be to get involved with me, and I'll settle for the third place. And I've got the championship. On the next heat we can have some fun.
His biggest challenge will come from Automark Toyota driver Dave Repsol, who's won the class title the last 3 years.
I have to win both leads. George has to at least not finish one heat and come third or fourth. And I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try and win both heats.
So, to the grid for the first heat, and only 0.02 of a second separate poleman Ben Morganroot from Chris Aberdeen, with the two Audis being split by the Ford of Sarel van der Merwe. Local ace Neville Rousseau in his V8 Opel Kadett joins fellow Cape Townian Jürgen Zubentheim in the V8 Ford Telstar in the third row. There are 22 cars on the grid, and it's up to Morganroot to set the pace for the rolling start. Morganroot's on the right, Aberdeen on the left, and tucked right below the Mazda's rear bumper is Sarel van der Merwe. It's go. This race cam action for Morganroot's rear bumper, and it's van der Merwe closing in, and oh, that's very close. Did they touch? Intercontinental for the first time, and Morganroot still has the lead. Aberdeen's on his outside, and he tucks into second position. Through the gears and then onto the brakes for Quarry Corner, and it's Morganroot, Aberdeen, van der Merwe, Moss, and then Rousseau and Zubentheim making up the rear of Class A. Morganroot goes a little wide, and now Aberdeen sees his chance, and he's going to dive through on the inside. But the Mazda just has the legs coming out of Quarry and through the kink. Now Morganroot will have to keep Aberdeen behind him going into Volkswagen sweep. Van der Merwe takes a defensive line, keeping Moss at bay, and that's the Opel Kadett of Neville Rousseau. Gary Dunkley has taken the Class B lead from Peter Lindenberg, followed by Willie Hepburn in the other Opel Record. We're with Terry Moss behind the Ford Mustang of van der Merwe. Down the back straights, doing 250 kilometers per hour before braking for the hairpin. This is a tight and difficult right-hander. Still, Morganroot, Aberdeen, van der Merwe. Moss, who takes a wider line, Rousseau, Zubentheim, and then the Class B battle. We're in it now. This is Willie Hepburn, who's taken second position from Lindenberg, and he's now lining up Gary Dunkley to take the lead in Class B. He's going through. He's right next to him. Yes, he's done it. Back to the leaders into lap 2, and still Morganroot has Aberdeen all over him as they take Conti Corner. How's this for a spectacular view? Like Jaws from the deep, Aberdeen's Audi looms menacingly. Just listen to that glorious sounding 4-rotor Mazda engine. The Class C battle, and it's Dave Repsold who's under threat from Steve Wyndham's Toyota Sprinter. Following at a safe distance is championship leader George Bezuidenhout in his Nissan Sentra. Now we're with Wyndham, who's on his home turf and knows Killarney like the back of his hand. He's a racer through and through, but has been suffering from inconsistency throughout the season. He took 2 wins in Port Elizabeth at the beginning of August, but had bad luck at the following meeting in September at Killarney and scored no points. Repsold, on the other hand, has scored in 20 out of the 22 previous races. He's going for a win to close the points gap between him and George Bezuidenhout, who has a 100% finish rate. This is the Class D battle. Charles Wilkin has taken the lead from Patrick Seddon, and Brian Maunder and his Golf is in third. Wilkin's already taken the class title for the year and is under no threat from anyone. Lap 7 out of 12, and still Morganroot is leading Aberdeen. He's opened up quite a gap, and the rest of the field is also falling back. Now we're with Moss in fourth behind Sarel van der Merwe in third. Literally a bird's eye view from the race cam on his helmet. He's lining up for the inside, but he's not close enough, and van der Merwe also takes a defensive line through Continental, frustrating Moss corner after corner. Here's our leader again as he brakes hard for Quarry. Morganroot leads only 14 points to take second position in the championship, but with 29 up for grabs, he's by no means assured of anything. And now the slower traffic's coming into the picture as we see him accelerating away from George Bezuidenhout's Class C Nissan Sentra. This was a clever move as he puts the slower car between him and Aberdeen just before Sabert sweep into the back straight. Class B and leader Willie Hepburn's having an almighty dice with the Class A Opel Kadett of Neville Rousseau. This is what it looks like from close up. Hepburn had a better line through Conti and comes out quicker, but there's just not enough road to take the outside line for Quarry. He'll have to stay next to Rousseau on the outside and wait for another opportunity later on. Back to the leaders, and still Morganroot leads Aberdeen, but behind them Steve Wyndham's taken the lead in Class C from Dave Repsold. Aberdeen doesn't seem to have an answer for the flying Mazda. They're coming up to complete lap 8 with Ben Morganroot still in the lead, and Morganroot swerves to the left. There's something wrong. Yes, Aberdeen sweeps past and Morganroot slowing down dramatically. He's pulling off the track, and this seems terminal. What a cruel blow to a driver who still needs championship points and can ill afford not to finish. He's parked the car just after the Goodyear Bridge, and there he is. He seems to be fine, so something has definitely broken on the car. Hepburn and Neville Rousseau are still at it, hammer and tongs, and this time it's Hepburn first into the corner. Gary Dunkley second in Class B, and a little further back, the newly crowned class champion, Peter Lindenberg, is lying in third. Here's our Class D leader, Charles Wilkin, who's driven a faultless race from pole position in his class. He's still closely followed by Patrick Seddon in the Opel Cadet, with Brian Maunter taking up third position. It's the final lap coming up, and Aberdeen's enjoying a large gap between him and second place Sarel van der Merwe. We're with Terry Moss behind the Ford Mustang of van der Merwe. He hasn't been able to get past it. It's probably a very frustrated Moss in third place. Van der Merwe's not about to give up his second position though, and he's keeping to the centre of the track. Nothing wrong with that, as long as you don't deliberately weave in front of the guy behind you to keep him from passing. The slower traffic isn't helping Moss's cause at all, but both get by cleanly. Back to Aberdeen, who's had 2 wins this season. He won the first heat at the same venue in April, as well as the first heat in Port Elizabeth on the 6th of August. You can see the gap between first and second, and it's clear that van der Merwe is holding up Terry Moss. Here's the Class B dice, and Gary Dunkley's rapidly closing in on Willie Hepburn. Hepburn still has Neville Rousseau to contend with, and quite a long way back is Peter Lindenberg. Lindenberg made sporting history this year by clinching both the Formula 1 Powerboat and Wesbank Class B championships. Into the second last corner for Chris Aberdeen to take his 3rd victory of the year. No problems for him after the demise of Ben Morgenrud, but it's a furious battle for second between Sarel van der Merwe and Terry Moss. Moss has only this one last chance, but van der Merwe neatly takes the defensive line again, and this is the way they're going to finish. An easy victory for Chris Aberdeen, and with Moss finishing 3rd and no points for Ben Morgenrud, the 2nd position in the championship is a real possibility for Terry Moss. Willie Hepburn takes Class B honours ahead of a hard-charging Gary Dunkley, who started to come to grips with his new car, while Steve Wyndham takes Class C and Charles Wilkin Class D. George Bezuidenhout's second in class is enough for him to clinch the first national class title of his career.
You know, once again, we have the problem with the slow traffic that the speed differential between the cars is incredible. And they don't see you coming, so it's kind of hit and miss. You're just trying to avoid them, but it's always tight.
And while his pit crew were busy repairing the problem in Ben Morgenrud's car, we wanted to know from him what happened.
One of the rose joints holding the upper wishbone broke off, and the back wheel was just flapping forward and backwards. We were quite lucky that the car didn't go into the wall.
While Morgenrud had one race in which to achieve his objective, George Bezuidenhout had just achieved his.
Yeah, I won the championship because I've finished in all the races between 1st and 3rd position. The Toyotas are quicker than me, but they had more mechanical problems, and I had no mechanical problems. That is the reason for winning the championship.
There are still some scores to be settled in the second heat as the field approaches the rolling start. The starting order is according to the finishing order in the first heat, and it's Aberdeen to the right of your picture with van der Merwe to the left. For the last time under these rules, we're in at the start of the race with Moss as he floors the throttle and pulls in next to van der Merwe. Through Continental Corner, and Moss takes second from van der Merwe. Now it's an Audi 1-2, and we'll really see the power and handling of these fantastic machines on a circuit that suits them like a glove. Number 2 is Aberdeen, number 1 is Moss, and already they're pulling away from van der Merwe. This is the view from Patrick Seddon's Class D Opel, following close on the heels of class champion Charles Wilkin's Toyota Sprinter. Oh, and somebody's off. It's the Class B Opel record of Peter Lindenberg. He lost it as he came out of quarry, and that's probably it for him. Down the back straight on lap 1, and Aberdeen and Moss are pulling away from the opposition. 3rd is Ben Morgenrud, who started at the back of the Class A field and is past van der Merwe already. Gary Dunkley. And he's off. He goes on straight into the gravel on the outside of the hairpin. What could have happened? He seems to keep the engine running. He's trying to get back. George Bezuidenhout has passed. There's Charles Wilkin and Steve Wyndham in the Class C cars right behind Wilkin. Now Dunkley will have to get past these slower cars, but he shouldn't have too much of a problem doing that. Here's Aberdeen and Moss again, and there can be no doubt about the supremacy of these 2 magnificent 4-wheel drive machines here at Killarney. They really come into their own. Behind them, Morgenrud's in 3rd, with what must surely be an unhappy Sarel van der Merwe in 4th position. He likes only one thing on a racetrack, and that's to win. Mind you, so do all of them. This is the Class B leader, and Willie Hepburn throws that big V8-powered Opel record around with gay abandon. Neville Rousseau once again keeps close tabs on him. Back with Patrick Seddon, second in Class D. He goes very wide coming into and through quarry, and that's the reason why Brian Maunter from Cape Town's taken the East Londoner on, and he's determined to take second position from him. Let's watch them into Volkswagen, and yes, he had the line, took it, and Maunter is in second. Into the hairpin, and Aberdeen takes the defensive line. Moss seems to be very close to him and on the attack. Morgan Rood still third with Vanamava fourth. In with Moss, and this is interesting. The race cam on his helmet really gives one the feeling of how bumpy it is in one of these powerful race cars. Let's enjoy the ride. Morgan Rood's in third and on 22 points. He's on track for second in the championship, and somebody's off. It's George Bezuidenhout who loses it through the kink. You'd better get out of the way. That's Wyndham coming through, and no, George, that's not the way to celebrate your new title. This is Steve Wyndham, the very likeable Cape Townian who won his class in the previous heat. But he seems very relaxed, too relaxed in fact. There must be something wrong with his car. He's looking around in the cockpit, and there's the answer. Lots of smoke from the Toyota Sprinter, and that means only one thing, a blown engine. What a pity. He pulls off. There's George Bezuidenhout, who also seems to be going very slowly. He's had a perfect finishing record so far this season, so let's hope he'll make it 24 in a row. And there, in a safe but rather lonely first position in Class B, is Willie Hepburn. This is the little man with the big heart, Mr. V8 in South African motorsport, at work in the cockpit of his Opel Record. It's only a master in action that makes it look that easy from the outside. The last lap, and Aberdeen has pulled away a little bit from Terry Moss. Now, all of a sudden, Moss is right behind his teammate. There's something broken on the number 2 car. Or is this a deliberate slowdown on the part of Aberdeen so that the 2 cars can circulate together around the historic last lap of the current Wesbank Modified Touring Car Challenge format? This is highly risky if in fact it is the case, because Morgan Rood in third place would like nothing better than to catch them out. Well, they're definitely going slower, and it seems as though they're treating the final lap as a victory lap. And there's Morgan Rood. He's caught right up to them. Are we in for a dramatic finale to this story? We're in car with Morgan Rood, and he's right on the tail of Terry Moss. He floors it, but so do Moss and Aberdeen. What's going on here? There's only 2 corners to go, and is the Audi driver's high-stakes cat-and-mouse game with Morgan Rood going to backfire on them? Now they're defending. Aberdeen goes to the inside, Moss to the outside. Morgan Rood goes in deep. They're holding their positions, and this is going to be how they'll finish. This is nail-biting stuff. Morgan Rood stays in third and collects his 22 points to secure a second position in the championship behind his Sasol and Samcor teammate, Sarel Vanamava. Aberdeen takes his second victory for the day. Vanamava comes in 4th, Hepburn comes in 5th overall, with Neville Rousseau in a creditable 5th in class and 6th overall. Charles Wilkin is an excellent 8th overall, just behind Peter Lindenberg, who also finishes 2nd in Class B. They're the class victories for the second heat. Aberdeen, Hepburn and Wilkin make it 2 in a row each, while Bezuidenhout finishes the season with 24 out of 24 finishes.
It's been a difficult year, but a fantastic ending. To have a 1-2 like this, the crowd responded. It was unbelievable when we had that final lap. The crowd went absolutely crazy. It's so sad, really, to see the end of this formula, but I guess it's the best way to go, and I'm really ecstatic, and the team has done a fantastic job. Rothmans and Audi, I mean, we've had a difficult season, but a fantastic ending. It couldn't have ended any better.
And just to crown Aberdeen's words, the ever-popular Willie Hepburn decided to treat the huge crowd to some donuts on the start and finish line. Some expensive rubber going up in smoke, but the crowd love it. And not to be outdone, superstar Sarel Vanamava also decided to put on his farewell to the greatest spectacle in South African motor racing history. Adieu to the supercars of the Wesbank Modified Touring Car Challenge. And it's fitting that the great man also takes the final overall championship in this formula's last season. 3 of the 4 class winners came in the top 6 of this year's championship: Vanamava, Bezuidenhout and Wilkin.